Trev, let's jump into the offensive breakdown and look at the keys to victory for the Notre Dame offense. And when you start with this group, look, you guys know where we're going, right? Let's just get into it. And it's important. It's very important for this game as it is every week. It's start fast. Mm-hmm. Got to start fast. And there's multiple. This is not a game where I necessarily think it's going to be you got to quiet the crowd down. I don't know. USC's attendance this year has honestly been kind of sad, to be honest with you, disappointing. You know, the Nebraska game was pretty big, but a lot of that was Nebraska fans. You know what I mean? There's 63,000 for the Rutgers game. The Penn State crowd was kind of big, but it was, at least tickets wise, like some of these games, like they say that the tickets are X amount, and then you look at then you're like, that doesn't look like 75,000 people. But a lot of those times it's the opposing crowd. There's going to be a lot of Notre Dame fans there. But what you can't do is let the USC crowd that is there kind of really get into it and get too fired up for the game. But it's the start fast in this particular game has more to do with these two teams against each other. And as we said, this is not a USC team that if you jump out quick 14-0, they're just going to quit. That's just not who they are. They're not that kind of squad. But, you know, when you look at their games this year, Trev, there haven't been a whole lot of games where they've really trailed a lot early. You know, there haven't been a lot of games where they have fallen behind the way that Notre Dame has gotten people to fall behind. And I think that's been sort of a factor in part of their success this season, is that they haven't had to do that. You know, you look at the LSU game, they scored first, and then, you know, it was like back and forth the entire game. You look at the Michigan game, Michigan jumped out to a 14-0 lead. USC battled back, but in the end, they just didn't have enough because they were playing catch up the whole game. And Michigan obviously was able to win the game. They were able to get down. They were down 21-10 at halftime against Wisconsin and battled back. But that was the game where they scored first. It was kind of Wisconsin took it over a little bit in the second quarter. And then the Washington game, it was a game where they were down 20-7 at halftime and could just never quite get back into it until late. And then, of course, Washington goes right down the field and gets it back. Actually, that was a game where it was 27 at halftime, and then I think USC scored all the points in the third quarter, took the lead into the fourth quarter, and then they didn't score anything in the fourth quarter, which hurt them. But again, you exhaust a lot of energy trying to come back, and then that's why you're seeing teams kind of put you away in the fourth quarter, because you just have to exhaust so much energy into coming back. But Notre Dame's the kind of team where when they jump on you, they can jump on you and then bury you. And that's going to be the key in this game, is you got to start fast. You've got to get some momentum going in this game. You've got to get your confidence going. You've got to shake off whatever travel rust that you've got going on. Because in a game like this, Trev, my fear is you start slow, they get confident, they find some things they like about you, and then it just starts slowly just kind of going downhill a little bit. So that's why I think getting some really early momentum, some really early excitement on this offense, putting the ball in the end zone, drive one, drive two, drive three is how you kind of put this team away. And then also, Trev, this isn't just about beating USC, right? Like the main goal on Saturday is just win the game. If you win the game, you're not only in, but you're hosting. That's just now maybe 6, maybe 8, but you're hosting. However, if you're talking about, okay, what's the ideal scenario for Notre Dame? A whooping of USC is ideal, because that may be enough to vault them ahead of Penn State and kind of lock them in for maybe a 6 or a 5 to 7 seed. Most likely that 6 seed. I think 5 is going to require some other upsets tomorrow, is just kind of what I think. But it puts them in a position where, 5 and 6, however, are more, realistic, especially that 6 seed becomes a lot more realistic. So a convincing win is huge, and you're going to need to start fast and just jump all over USC to make that happen. Make this team say, hey, look, you're going to have a tough time today. And you want to put a quarterback making only his 3rd Power 5 start and never having faced a defense like this, you want to put him behind the 8 ball where they got to drop back and throw the ball. And as we get into the keys to victory for the defense, your offense jumps on them and gets a lot of points early. It immediately takes away the top 2 or 3 things that USC wants to do to try to make this a football game. And this is where the offense can help out the defense in a big way, Trev.
Starting fast is going to be a massive key. It will put Notre Dame in the driver's seat to dictate the pace of the game. And when you have somebody on the other side of the ball, an offensive mind like Lincoln Riley, who has an arsenal of very athletic receivers at his disposal, you have to make sure that you're dictating the pace. Don't let USC get in any sort of rhythm. That's why I love starting fast in this game. You dictate the pace, you dictate the tempo, you control the noise. And if Notre Dame is able to start fast on offense and defense, that's really going to aid it. They started fast on offense and defense against Army, and we know how that game went. Now, USC is a different football team than Army. They're put together a little bit differently. But I think the same principle still applies. If you're able to start fast and remain fast, that's another key. Like, that's the only kind of next level that I'll add to starting fast. Is we've seen games where Notre Dame drives down the field and scores on their first possession. And then we don't really see anything for the next quarter to quarter and a half. So go out, start fast, remain fast, finish strong, and I like our odds on Saturday. I do.
Y'all know how fired up Trevor is for this game because he just said our odds. That means Trevor is in his this is a big one mode that he's feeling it right now.
Yeah.
Trev, I love it. Key number 2, you got to run the football. You got to establish a run game. I mean, this is such an important part to this game, Trevor, and it's for a couple reasons. Number one is it's like when you're to win games like this, you got to do well what you do well, right? And this is a team that runs the football. I've heard a lot of people say, like, USC's got a good run defense, and I guess it depends on how you look at it. Their defense is better. Their run defense is better than it was last year. There's no doubt about that. Last year, USC gave up 186.5 rushing yards per game. They gave up over 200 yards, 6 times, including 316 to Washington, who's not a team known for running the football. They did held Notre Dame to 125 because they only had 29 carries because they had short fields. But this year they've only given up over 200 yards once, and that was all the way back on September 21st against Michigan. They haven't given up over 125 yards since back on October 5th. So in a lot of ways, Trevor, their run defense has certainly improved. They held LSU to 117, Utah State to 187, Wisconsin to 106, Penn State to 118, Maryland to 56, Rutgers to 121, Washington to 113, Nebraska to 119, and UCLA to 111. Having said that, I would say this. They have not faced a team like Notre Dame in a while, and they still gave up over 4 yards a carry to UCLA, Nebraska. The last 3 teams, 4 of the last 5 teams they've played have carried the ball less than 30 times in a game. They don't play a lot of really good rushing teams. And when you look at Notre Dame and you look at this USC defense and you talk about, well, who have they played so far? Here's what the ranks are for the teams that they've played when it comes to rushing offense. LSU ranks 109th in rushing. Utah State ranks 30th. They did shut down Utah State, Power 5 team. Michigan ranks, see here, they're way down here. They were better than 71st in rushing. Wisconsin ranks 65th. Penn State ranks 28th. They did a good job in that game. Maryland ranks 115th. Rutgers ranks 51st, although they do have a 1,000-yard running back. Washington ranks 86th. Nebraska ranks 100th, and UCLA ranks 130th. So that's going to factor into why you're holding some of these teams down. And when you look at USC's numbers, there's certainly a lot to like about it. And it's like, as I said, a huge credit to Danton Lynn for turning them around, because even some of those teams that didn't run the ball well would have ran the ball well on them last year. And so when you look at the overall numbers on the season, they rank 43rd in rushing yards per game. That's actually better than what Notre Dame is doing. Notre Dame is giving up 133.6. Again, this is why I say context matters, because Notre Dame has played Army, who they gave up 207 rushing yards to, which is like 130 less than what they normally get. They also played Navy, who's averaging 243 rushing yards a game on the season, and Notre Dame held them to gave them to 222, which is below their season average. So when you're playing teams that run the triple option, your numbers are going to be naturally higher in that regard. But Notre Dame has a run defense that's been good at time, but at times it can be vulnerable, and their numbers are very similar to USC. So it shows, just kind of where Notre Dame is when it comes to rush defense on the season, and compared to where USC is. And just for another quick comparison, Notre Dame's rush defense this season ranks 13th against FBS opponents, which is when you remove the 2 option teams. and USC's ranks 37th. So again, they're both quality rush defenses. But one big difference is when you get down to some of the other numbers, Trev, beyond just the yards per game, they rank 73rd in yards allowed per attempt. They rank 54th in touchdowns allowed, and they rank 79th in giving up 7 runs of 30 yards or more, and they only rank 119th in tackles for loss. Compare that to Notre Dame, who ranks 11th in yards per game, 3rd in yards per attempt, 3rd in rushing touchdowns, 5th in the country of runs of 30 yards or more with 14, and they rank 28th in fewest tackles for loss allowed. So when you look at those numbers, obviously this is a huge mismatch for Notre Dame, a huge advantage for Notre Dame, and USC has not played a team like this. But I also would contend that it's been probably since the Georgia Tech game that Notre Dame played a run defense like USC's from a talent standpoint. Now, USC's run defense to me is not better than Army's in regards to how it's carried out, how it's coached, how it's defended, and they ran well then. But Army doesn't have the athletes and the players that USC does. So I would say, since they've seen a run defense with this kind of talent, you have to go back to Georgia Tech. And in the last 5 games, Trevor, Notre Dame has ran for over 500. Last 6 games, Notre Dame has gone for 201 yards or more in 5 of those 6 games. 229 against Stanford, 265 against Navy, 201 against Florida State, 234 against Virginia, 273 against Army. The only team to hold them below that was all the way back against Georgia Tech, who held them to 168, and was also the last team to hold Notre Dame below 5 yards a carry. Actually, the last team to hold Notre Dame below 6 yards a carry was that Georgia Tech team. So it's going to be a battle. Notre Dame can run the ball on them. Doesn't mean that they will, but if they're going to win this game, they need to. Look, and I don't care if they come out in the first series and throw the ball a few times just to loosen USC up if they're like loading the box. That's fine. But over the course of this 60-minute game, you have to establish a ground attack. You have to be aggressive. You have to go after them. You have to be at your best at what is your best, Trev, and that is running the football. It's got to be a big game for Jeremiah Love. It's got to be a big game for Jadarian Price. And I won't be shocked if we see a little bit of Riley Leonard, some designed Riley Leonard runs sprinkled in there as well.
I've talked ad nauseum this season about how much of a rhythm-based offense Notre Dame's is, and a lot of that is held in the key of being able to run the football well. You know, Marcus Freeman talks all the time about how their identity, they're a run-first football team. They're driven by the offensive and defensive line. And what Mike Denbrock's going to have to do a good job of doing is looking at it kind of through the lens that you just talked about. USC has a good run defense, like statistically, like they have better athletes than what Army had. They also have not faced Jeremiah Love. They have not faced Jadarian Price. They haven't faced a mobile quarterback like Riley Leonard yet. Use that to your advantage. Now, obviously, there has to come to some level of balance. And over the past couple of games, Notre Dame's done a really good job of maintaining a balanced offense. Right? There's a lot of times that I go back and I look at the box score and they have 436 total yards, and it's literally almost 218 passing, 218 rushing, or some sort of formula in there. And that is going to be very much what I think they're going to have to be able to do tomorrow, because if you're able to run the ball well, that goes back to what we talked about in point number 1, is dictating the pace of the game, starting fast. Starting fast doesn't always mean start ripping off 45-yard bombs on the second play of the game. Be able to run the football effectively. It's going to be able to set up play action well. And I think Notre Dame's offense is going to do really well if they're able to get that run game going, man. I mean, it's going to give the offensive line. You want to talk about something that's rhythm-based. Notre Dame's offensive line is rhythm-based. More times than not, when they were able to get a good push in the run game, the passing game, it's almost like that level of confidence for them starts to step up a little bit. And in games where they're able to run the football effectively, their pass protection steps up a little bit, opposed to in games where they're not able to. So, yeah, running the football well and establishing a solid ground game is going to be huge tomorrow.
Now, I love how you call it a mindset, Trev, and that's exactly what it is. That's exactly what what it is for them in this game. Running the football is going to be a mindset, and it's going to bleed into everything else that they do.
Mm-hmm.
You're absolutely correct. Number 3 is, and I think this is important, Trev, this is getting Riley Leonard into a good early rhythm in this game. I think that's going to be huge. And there's a lot of different ways. One, you kind of talked about pass pro. That's a big one. UCLA or USC has not been a team that is like incredibly great at generating a lot of sacks on the season. They've only generated, let me go here. Let me pull up USC stats here real quick. So USC on the season Trev has actually, I got my stacking up article right here. So USC's pass defense, they rank 99th in the country in sacks with 18. That's that they've only generated 18 sacks in the season. However, 5 of those 18 and 5 of those 18 have come in the last 2 games. And 10 of those 18 have come in the last 4 games. So they've been much better down the stretch at getting after the quarterback than they were for much of this regular season. And part of that is, I think, a better understanding of D'Anton Lynn's system, timing of blitzes, things like that. You had some personnel that you were missing. You've had to get used to not having. When Eric Gentry went out, they had to kind of adapt and how they were going to handle be defensively. And if you look at how effective he was early in the season, this is a crazy stat, Trevor. Eric Gentry still leads them in tackles for loss at 6.5.
They do.
He only played 4 games. He got hurt against Wisconsin, and he didn't have a tackle for loss in that game. He had his first 6.5 were in the first 3 games. He was a major weapon for that defense. That when they lost him, it really forced them to have to figure some stuff out and adjust and adapt. And then obviously that kind of, I think, put them in some tough spots, and they had to adjust. And I think they're a better defense now as they've had to learn to adjust. They have some young players on the edge that are now more experienced and more effective. So, I think they're a more dangerous pass rushing team now than what their stats might otherwise dictate or show, because they've evolved. They've gotten better. I mean, if you look at parts of Notre Dame's defense back in September, you'd say, well, they're not very good at this. And then you say, well, yeah, they weren't then, but they are now. And I think that's something that's been important for this USC team, is that. So protecting Riley Leonard is going to be key number one. You can't get into a rhythm if you don't protect the quarterback. I think, as we talked about earlier, maybe having him get in some running situations, which, to kind of get him to a rhythm. But then Mike Denbrock has to really be on top of his game to say, what did Riley do well this week? What's he feeling really good about? And when you put that script together, there's got to be some stuff in there that lets Riley get into an early rhythm. That doesn't mean a bunch of hitches. Sometimes that can mean some deep shots. It's just whatever you feel best as far as what he did in practice this week to say, look, he was feeling this, he was feeling that. Maybe a couple screens helping him get some early completions, a couple RPOs, some things like that. And then I also think a little tempo early would be huge. This is not a super deep USC team, and they've played a lot of really hard-fought 60-minute physical football games last month. I think if you push the tempo a little bit, you might get them on their heels and wear them down a little bit, on top of getting Riley Leonard into an early rhythm. Because if Riley comes into this game hot early, I don't think USC has much of a chance. I really don't. And that's going to be a big part of it, is really getting Riley Leonard rolling in this game.
Riley Leonard does the best job of getting into a rhythm when systematically Mike Denbrock calls plays that allow him to go be an athlete. Now, sometimes that is a designed run. Sometimes that is, taking a couple deep shots down the field, let him get in a rhythm, kind of see how the arm's feeling that day. To me, the best way that Riley Leonard has gotten in a rhythm all season is those RPO plays. He's been reading those really, really well. There was a couple times where linebackers stayed back, took away that slant route, and then Riley Leonard was just able to go make a play. And those games, to me, those types of plays are what I've seen him get into a rhythm more often. I'm not necessarily saying let him go out and play street ball for 4 quarters, but that is when Riley Leonard is at his best. So if they're able to basically, if Mike Denbrock is able to call the game in a way that allows Riley to play to his strengths, hey, man, go out and be an athlete. Just go out and dictate the pace of this game. Go play point guard, right? I think, to your point, USC is going to have a really hard time keeping up with this offense, especially with the defense that they're facing tomorrow.
Then the final point, Trev, is when you watch USC, and this is taken a little bit from what Penn State did, but also other games, Nebraska at times had some success with this. UCLA really had some success with this. Get creative with your tight end and running back pass game. This is a defense that doesn't handle levels very well, and Penn State exploited that. Notre Dame doesn't run a lot of levels, to be honest with you. They're more of a horizontal stretch type of offense, but you've got it in your system. Use it. I think if you can get creative with how you use your running backs in the pass game, how you use your safeties, that's going to help schematically. The other part of it too, Trevor, is just looking at it from a pure matchup standpoint. The reality is that USC, and you and I talked about this I talked about this on Monday because I haven't done a show with you since Monday, or actually at all this week, right? Did we?
We did the college football
I mean,
show,
as far as a
the
Notre
playoff
Dame
rankings,
USC
but
preview.
yeah,
Yeah.
nope, this is the first one this
Yeah.
week.
So one thing that I pointed out was USC is not good when it comes to coverage from the linebacker or safety standpoint. Both that are two linebackers who are really good run defenders. And Easton Mascarenas, I'm drawing a blank on his Arnold, right? Who's a really good run defender in my opinion. Was an All Pac-12 guy last year. The other linebacker, Mason Cobb, who transferred over 2 years ago from Oklahoma State. You've got Achille Arnold, who transferred from UCLA, who I'm a big fan of, from Oregon State. And then Kamari Ramsey, who transferred in from UCLA. They're all really good run defenders. And I think their arrivals and their presence, especially the guys that are new this year, so Mascarenas, Arnold, Achille Arnold, and Kamari Ramsey are factors. And then, of course, Nate Clifton at D tackle is another factor there, who's also a first-year transfer guy. Those guys all have played a big role in UCLA being an improved run defense. The problem is, Trev, they're not real good in coverage. Like, they're not good in coverage at all. Opponents have completed, it's according to Pro Football Focus, opponents have completed 38 out of 40 attempts against Easton Mascarenas Arnold for 389 yards. And then the two passes that were not caught, however, were picks. He picked them off. So literally a ball thrown at him has not hit the ground all year. You look at Kamari Ramsey. He's given up 25 of 35 completions on the season. He's given up 2 touchdowns. Opponents are completing 25 out of 30 passes on Achille Arnold for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mason Cobb has given up 18 out of 28 pass attempts this year for 150 yards. He also has 2 interceptions, right? So, again, you've got to be a little careful with those guys. But when you look at it, Trevor, it's like those guys, Zion Branch plays some at safety. He's given up 10 of 16. I mean, that's in 2 touchdowns. Teams have had a lot of success throwing the football at their linebackers and at their safeties when they get into the right type of situations. Anthony Beavers plays a lot. He's given up 9 of 9 attempts for 63 yards, right? So this is a matchup, and Kamari Arnold, or the 2 linebackers are 6 foot, although Ryan verified on the show on Monday that his official listing is closer to 5'11". Achille Arnold, Kamari Ramsey, they're all listed at 6 feet tall. Mason Cobb, 6 feet tall. You've got 6'6" tight ends, 6'7" tight ends. You've got 6'1" running backs. This is a game where, and it kind of ties into getting Riley Leonard going. If there's some creativity to how he uses his running backs and tight ends in the screen game and in the drop back pass game with ISOs, with clear outs, some different things. I mean, look, I'm not asking Mitchell Evans to do it what Tyler Warren did. Right? I mean, that's a little nuts. He's not going to catch 17 passes for 224 yards, but you can have some success throwing to your running backs and your tight ends against this defense, Trev. There's no doubt about it. And that's something that I want to see Notre Dame do. I mean, you look at USC, and I mean the UCLA game. You know, TJ Harden had 3 catches for 37 yards. They ran a tight end screen for a touchdown, and they don't throw to their running backs a whole lot. So I definitely think this is a type of game, Trev, where if you can be creative with how you use those players and they're very talented pass game weapons, you can take advantage big time of this USC defense, their lack of height, their lack of coverage ability up the middle at linebacker and at safety. That's my final big piece, where you could get some big time chunk plays in this game, and from both positions if you're creative enough with it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to matchups, right? I know we talked at the beginning of the show about how Notre Dame can't just go out and out-athlete this team. That doesn't mean that from when you look at Notre Dame versus USC in a vacuum, that doesn't mean that they're at an equal level of athleticism. That just means you can't sacrifice being able to execute and just say, well, we just have better guys. It's an and, right? That's the way that I look at it. And Notre Dame has better athletes than what USC does in given matchups. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, the glaring one is tight ends and running backs versus their linebackers and safeties. And if Notre Dame is able to take advantage of those and get their players into open space, get Jeremiah Love in space with the ball in his hands 5 yards past the line of scrimmage, good luck. And that's not a slight to USC. Do you know who's been able to bring him down in the open field? Not a single team that Notre Dame's been able that Notre Dame has faced this year. Not a one.
Right.
Not a one. So use those to your advantage. And I think you said it perfectly. You want to know the best way to get Riley Leonard in a rhythm. You have an arsenal of 3 tight ends, all 6'5" and above. Get those guys in a rhythm. Get them going. Get Jeremiah Love out in space. Hit Aeneas Williams on a flat route like you did against Georgia Tech to get you down into the red zone on 3rd down, right? So just make sure that you're taking advantage of those matchups and get them going. It's all going to be about rhythm for Notre Dame's offense on Saturday. And utilizing the running backs and the tight ends is going to be huge.